The humiliation burned hotter than the Colorado sun beating down on Catherine Bradford's face as she stood in the middle of the dusty ranch yard, holding a saddle upside down while the ranch hands erupted in laughter. She had arrived in Durango just 3 days ago, fresh from Boston with trunks full of fancy dresses and not a single practical skill to her name. And already she had become the joke of the entire Double H ranch. "City girl does not even know which way a saddle goes," one of the hands called out, slapping his knee as tears of mirth rolled down his weathered cheeks. Catherine felt her throat tighten as she struggled to flip the heavy leather saddle right side up, her arms trembling from the weight. She had never held anything heavier than a teacup in her 22 years of life. And now here she was, expected to work alongside experienced ranch hands who had been doing this since they could walk. Her uncle Marcus had sent for her after her father's shipping business collapsed in the financial panic of 1873, leaving the Bradford family destitute. The letter had been brief and businesslike, offering her room and board in exchange for work on his ranch. Catherine had imagined herself perhaps helping with bookkeeping or teaching the ranch children their letters, not wrestling with saddles and mucking out stables. But Uncle Marcus had made it clear upon her arrival that everyone on the Double H earned their keep through real ranch work, no exceptions. "That is enough." A deep voice cut through the laughter like a knife through butter. Catherine looked up to see a tall man striding toward her from the barn, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of strong coffee. His face was stern but not unkind, and when he reached her, he gently took the saddle from her shaking arms as though it weighed nothing at all. "Get back to work, all of you," he said to the other hands, his tone brooking no argument. "We have got 30 horses to exercise before noon, and you are wasting time standing around like a bunch of gossiping washerwomen." The laughter died immediately, and the men dispersed, grumbling under their breath. Catherine stood frozen, humiliation giving way to gratitude as the stranger set the saddle down properly on the fence rail. "Thank you," she managed to whisper, her voice thick with unshed tears. He turned to look at her, and his expression softened slightly. "You are Marcus's niece from back east, are you not, Catherine?" she nodded, not trusting herself to speak without her voice breaking. "I am Vincent Hartley," he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm but careful when she placed her smaller hand in his, as though he was aware of his own strength and did not want to hurt her. "I am the foreman here. Your uncle asked me to show you the ropes, teach you what you need to know." "I am sorry," Catherine blurted out, the words tumbling over themselves in her haste to explain. "I know I am useless. I have never done any of this before, and I keep making mistakes, and everyone thinks I am ridiculous, and I do not blame them because I am ridiculous, coming here thinking I could just stop," Vincent said, but his tone was gentle rather than harsh. "You are not useless. You just have not learned yet. There is a difference." Catherine looked up at him, searching his face for signs of mockery but found none. His dark eyes were serious and patient, and something in her chest loosened just a fraction. "Come on," he said, picking up the saddle again. "Let me show you how this works, and we will take it slow. No one is born knowing how to saddle a horse. Every person on this ranch had to learn at some point, and I am willing to bet most of them did not do it perfectly the first time either." Over the next hour, Vincent Hartley proved to be the most patient teacher Catherine had ever encountered. He showed her how to approach a horse, how to let the animal get used to her presence before attempting to saddle it. He explained the purpose of each strap and buckle, demonstrating the proper way to lift the saddle and settle it onto the horse's back. "You want to make sure the saddle sits behind the shoulder blades," he said, adjusting the position slightly. "If it is too far forward, it will restrict the horse's movement and cause discomfort. Feel right here." He guided her hand to the horse's shoulder. "You can feel where the blade ends. The saddle goes behind that point." Catherine focused intently on everything he said, determined not to disappoint this man who was being so kind to her. The horse, a gentle mare named Daisy, stood patiently while Catherine fumbled with the cinch strap. "I cannot get it tight enough," she said, frustration creeping into her voice as the strap slipped through her fingers for the third time. "Here." Vincent moved to stand behind her, reaching around to place his hands over hers. Catherine was suddenly very aware of his closeness, the warmth of his body at her back, the scent of leather and sage that clung to his clothes. "You need to pull straight down, not out. Use your body weight, not just your arms. Like this." With his guidance, the strap finally tightened properly, and Catherine felt a surge of accomplishment that was entirely out of proportion to the simple task. "I did it," she said, a smile breaking across her face for the first time in days. Vincent stepped back, and she could hear the smile in his voice even before she turned to see it. "You did. Now do it again with this next horse, and we will see if you can manage it on your own." By the time the morning was over, Catherine had successfully saddled 3 horses under Vincent's watchful eye. Her arms ached, and she was fairly certain she would have blisters on her palms by evening, but she felt a strange sense of pride in what she had accomplished. "Tomorrow we will work on actually riding," Vincent said as they walked back toward the main house for the midday meal. "But you did well today. Better than I expected for someone who has never worked with horses before." "Truly?" Catherine asked, unable to keep the hope from her voice. "Truly," he confirmed. "You listen, and you try hard. That is more than half the battle right there." The dining hall was a long building attached to the main house, where the ranch hands and family took their meals together at rough wooden tables. Catherine had been dreading this part of the day, knowing she would have to face the men who had laughed at her that morning, but Vincent's presence at her side seemed to afford her some protection. The hands nodded respectfully to the foreman as he passed, and no one made any jokes about Catherine's earlier fumbling. Uncle Marcus sat at the head of the table, a grizzled man in his 50s with a weathered face and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. He looked up as Catherine and Vincent entered. "I hear you have taken my niece under your wing, Vincent," Marcus said, his tone neutral but his eyes assessing. "Yes, sir," Vincent replied. "She is a quick learner. Give her a few weeks and she will be holding her own with the rest of us." Catherine felt warmth flood through her at his words, at the confidence in his voice. Uncle Marcus grunted, which she was learning was his equivalent of approval, and gestured for them to sit and eat. The meal was simple but filling: beef stew, fresh bread, and strong coffee that made Catherine's eyes water. She ate hungrily, surprised by her own appetite. The physical work had awakened something in her body that the sedentary life of a Boston society girl had never touched. After lunch, Vincent found her in the yard, adjusting her bonnet against the fierce afternoon sun. "Ready for the next lesson?" he asked. Catherine straightened her shoulders, ignoring the protests from her tired muscles. "Ready." He led her to the corral where several horses stood drowsing in the shade. The first rule of riding is understanding that the horse is not a machine. It is a living creature with its own thoughts and feelings. You need to build a relationship with your horse, earn its trust. Over the next several days, Vincent was true to his word about teaching her everything. He showed her how to muck out stalls properly, how to groom a horse until its coat gleamed, how to check hooves for stones and signs of injury. He taught her to recognize when a horse was calm and when it was spooked, how to move around the animals without startling them. The other ranch hands watched this process with varying degrees of skepticism, but none of them openly mocked her anymore. Whether this was due to Vincent's presence or to Catherine's own determination to prove herself, she was not sure. Probably a combination of both. On the fifth day, Vincent decided she was ready to actually mount a horse. Catherine approached Daisy, the gentle mare she had been working with all week, and tried to remember everything Vincent had taught her. Left foot in the stirrup, he coached from beside her. Hold the saddle horn and the back of the saddle. Now push up with your left leg and swing your right leg over. Do not worry, I have got you if you start to fall. Catherine took a deep breath and attempted to mount. Her first try was clumsy, and she only managed to hop around on one foot while Daisy turned her head to watch with what looked like amusement. Vincent caught her before she could topple over. It is harder than it looks, Catherine panted, feeling her face flush with embarrassment. Everything is harder than it looks, Vincent said calmly. Try again. You need to commit to the movement. Jump higher, swing faster. On her third attempt, Catherine found herself suddenly sitting in the saddle, looking down at the ground from what seemed like an enormous height. She grabbed the saddle horn with both hands, her heart racing. I am on, she said, almost disbelieving. You are on, Vincent confirmed, and there was unmistakable pride in his voice. How does it feel? Terrifying, Catherine admitted, but also wonderful. He laughed, a rich, warm sound that made something flutter in Catherine's stomach. That sounds about right. Now, let us talk about how to actually make the horse move. The next hour passed in a blur of instructions about leg pressure and rein handling, of walking Daisy around the corral while Vincent walked beside them, always within reach if Catherine needed him. By the end of the lesson, Catherine was managing to direct the mare through basic turns and stops without assistance. You are doing better than most beginners, Vincent said as he helped her dismount. Most people try to control the horse through force. You are learning to communicate with her instead. I had a good teacher, Catherine said, and then blushed at her own boldness. Something flickered in Vincent's dark eyes, but before he could respond, one of the hands came running up. Vincent, we have got a problem at the south pasture. Some of the fence is down, and the cattle are starting to wander. Vincent's expression immediately shifted to business. How many posts? At least 6, maybe more. Looks like something knocked them down in the night. Probably that bear we have been seeing tracks from, Vincent muttered. He turned to Catherine. I need to go deal with this. Can you handle feeding the horses in the near barn? Just hay, 2 flakes per animal. You remember which barn I mean, the one with the blue door, Catherine confirmed, feeling pleased that he trusted her with even this small task. That is right. I will check on you when I get back. Catherine watched him stride away, barking orders to gather men and equipment to fix the fence. Then she turned toward the barn, determined to complete her assigned task perfectly. The barn was dim and cool after the bright sunlight outside, and it took her eyes a moment to adjust. She located the hay stored in the loft and carefully climbed the ladder to retrieve it. The bales were heavy and awkward, but she managed to wrestle 2 of them down and began distributing the hay to the waiting horses. She was on her 4th animal when she heard footsteps behind her. Well, look who thinks she belongs here now. Catherine turned to find Jake Morneau, one of the ranch hands who had laughed the loudest that first day. He was leaning against a stall door, a sneer on his sun-darkened face. I am just feeding the horses like Vincent asked, Catherine said, keeping her voice steady even though her heart had started to pound. Vincent asked, Jake mimicked in a high-pitched voice. Teacher's pet, are you? Batting those pretty eyelashes at the foreman so he will go easy on you. That is not true, Catherine protested, anger starting to override her nervousness. "I am working just as hard as anyone else. You could not work as hard as any of us if you tried for 100 years, Jake said, pushing off from the door and moving closer. "You are nothing but dead weight, a liability. Marcus only keeps you around because you are family, and Vincent only pays attention to you because you are something pretty to look at. But you do not belong here, and everyone knows it." The words hit Catherine like physical blows, all the more painful because they echoed her own deepest fears. She wanted to argue to defend herself, but her throat had closed up and tears were threatening to spill over. "Is there a problem here?" Vincent's voice cracked through the barn like a whip, and both Catherine and Jake jumped. The foreman stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the bright sunlight, and even though Catherine could not see his face clearly, she could hear the cold anger in his voice. "No problem, boss," Jake said, but his tone had lost its confidence. "Just making conversation." "It did not sound like friendly conversation to me," Vincent said, moving into the barn. "It sounded like you were harassing a member of this crew while she was trying to do her job." "I was just saying—" "I heard what you were saying," Vincent cut him off. "And here is what I am saying. Catherine is working hard to learn everything we do here, which is more than I can say for you lately. I have noticed you taking extra long breaks, leaving your stalls only half cleaned, cutting corners wherever you think no one is watching. Maybe instead of criticizing her work, you should focus on improving your own." Jake's face flushed an angry red. "You cannot talk to me like that. I have been working this ranch for 5 years. And if you want to keep working this ranch, you will treat everyone on this crew with respect, regardless of how long they have been here," Vincent said. His voice was deadly calm now, which somehow made it more intimidating than if he had been shouting. "You will apologize to Miss Bradford, and then you will go finish mending that south fence. You are on fence duty for the rest of the week." "But that is the worst job on the ranch," Jake protested. "Then I guess you should have thought of that before you decided to act like a bully," Vincent replied. "Apologize." Jake looked like he wanted to argue further, but something in Vincent's expression must have convinced him it would be a bad idea. He turned to Catherine, though he did not quite meet her eyes. "Sorry," he muttered. "Louder and like you mean it," Vincent commanded. "I am sorry for what I said, Miss Bradford," Jake said, each word clearly costing him. "It was out of line." Catherine nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Jake shot Vincent one more resentful look before stalking out of the barn. In the silence that followed, Catherine became aware that tears were rolling down her cheeks. She tried to wipe them away quickly, but Vincent had already seen. "Do not let him get to you," Vincent said gently, moving to stand beside her. "Jake is angry because he thought he was in line for the foreman position when old Sam retired. When Marcus gave it to me instead, Jake never got over it. He takes out his bitterness on anyone he thinks he can push around." "What he said, though," Catherine's voice shook despite her best efforts to control it. "What if he is right? What if I am just dead weight and everyone is too polite to say so? Catherine, look at me." She raised her eyes to meet his, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "You are not dead weight," Vincent said firmly. "In the week you have been here, you have learned skills that usually take people months to master. You show up every morning ready to work, even though I know your muscles must be screaming. You do not complain, you do not give up, and you do not make excuses. Those qualities are worth more than 5 years of experience any day." "You really believe that?" Catherine whispered. "I really believe that," Vincent confirmed. "And I will tell you something else. Half the men on this crew could not have handled the humiliation you faced that first day and still come back the next morning ready to try again. That takes real courage." The tears were falling faster now, but they were different tears, born of relief and gratitude rather than shame. Without thinking, Catherine stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Vincent in a brief, tight hug. "Thank you," she said into his chest. "Thank you for believing in me." She felt him stiffen in surprise, and then his arms came up to return the embrace, careful and tentative. "You are welcome," he said softly, and Catherine thought she heard something in his voice that had not been there before, some warmth that went beyond mere kindness. She pulled back quickly, suddenly aware of the impropriety of hugging a man she had known for less than a week. But Vincent did not look offended. If anything, his expression had softened, and there was a gentleness in his eyes that made Catherine's heart do strange things in her chest. "Come on," he said after a moment. "Let us finish feeding these horses, and then I will show you how to prepare the evening feed. That is a skill you will need to know." As they worked side by side in the comfortable quiet of the barn, Catherine found herself stealing glances at Vincent's profile, at the strong line of his jaw, and the competent way his hands moved through each task. She had known handsome men in Boston, wealthy men with fine clothes and practiced compliments, but none of them had ever made her feel the way Vincent did. None of them had ever looked at her the way he did, like she was something precious and strong all at once. The days began to blend together in a rhythm of work and learning. Catherine's hands developed calluses, her muscles grew stronger, and her initial clumsiness gave way to increasing confidence. Vincent was there every step of the way, patient and encouraging, never losing his temper even when she made mistakes. He taught her to recognize signs of colic in horses, how to treat minor injuries, how to exercise the animals properly. He showed her the difference between various types of grain and hay, explained the importance of clean water and proper ventilation in the stables. Every lesson was thorough and practical, and Catherine soaked up the knowledge like parched earth absorbing rain. But it was not just the practical skills she was learning. She was also learning about Vincent himself. She discovered that he had grown up on a small ranch in Montana, that he had learned his trade from his father who had been a foreman before him. She learned that he had come to Colorado 3 years ago, looking for a fresh start after his father died, and that Uncle Marcus had hired him on the strength of his experience and his way with horses. "My father used to say that you can tell everything you need to know about a man by watching how he treats his animals," Vincent said one evening as they were grooming horses together. "A man who is patient and kind with his stock will usually be the same with people. A man who is rough and cruel to animals will show his true colors eventually." "Your father sounds like he was a wise man," Catherine said. "He was," Vincent agreed, and there was old pain in his voice. "He broke his leg in a fall from a spooked horse. It did not heal right, got infected. By the time the doctor admitted there was nothing he could do, it was too late." "I am sorry," Catherine said softly, pausing in her brushing to look at him. "It was 3 years ago, but some days it still feels fresh," Vincent admitted. "He was my best friend as well as my father. I miss him every single day." Without thinking, Catherine reached out and placed her hand over his where it rested on the horse's withers. Vincent looked down at their joined hands, and then up at her face, and something passed between them in that moment, something wordless and profound. "What about you?" Vincent asked, his voice rougher than usual. "You never talk much about Boston or why you came here." Catherine withdrew her hand and returned to grooming, needing something to do with her suddenly nervous energy. "There is not much to tell. My father was a shipping merchant, quite successful for many years, but when the panic happened in '73, he lost everything. The business, our house, everything. He died of a heart ailment 6 months later. My mother passed when I was young, so there was just me. No prospects, no money, nowhere to go. Uncle Marcus's letter offering me a place here was an answer to prayer, even if it was not quite what I expected. Do you miss it? Vincent asked. Boston, I mean, the life you had there. Catherine considered the question carefully. I miss certain things. I miss my father, of course. I miss having friends nearby, people I grew up with. But the life itself, she shook her head. I think I was always playing a role there, being the person everyone expected me to be. The proper young lady who knew how to pour tea and play piano and say the right things at parties. Here, I get to discover who I actually am beneath all that. It is terrifying, but it is also freeing. And who are you finding that you are? Vincent asked, and there was genuine curiosity in his voice. Catherine smiled. Someone stronger than I thought. Someone who does not give up easily. Someone who can learn and grow and change. She paused, then added more quietly, someone who likes the person she is becoming. I like the person you are becoming too, Vincent said, and the sincerity in his voice made Catherine's pulse quicken. They finished their grooming in silence, but it was a comfortable silence now, full of unspoken understanding. When they finally left the barn, the sun was setting over the distant peaks, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. It is beautiful here, Catherine said, stopping to admire the view. I never saw sunsets like this in Boston. It is one of my favorite things about Colorado, Vincent agreed. Every sunset is different, like the sky is putting on a private show just for us. They stood together watching the colors shift and change, and Catherine was acutely aware of Vincent's presence beside her, of the small space between them that seemed to hum with possibility. Vincent, she began, not sure what she wanted to say but feeling like something needed to be said. Catherine, he said at the same moment, and they both laughed. You first, Catherine offered. Vincent seemed to struggle with himself for a moment, and then he shook his head. It can wait. You go ahead. I just wanted to say thank you, Catherine said. Not just for teaching me about the ranch work, but for being kind when I needed kindness. For seeing potential in me when I could not see it in myself. For being patient and never making me feel stupid, even when I was making mistakes. You have given me something precious, and I want you to know that I appreciate it more than I can put into words. Vincent turned to face her fully, and in the dying light, his eyes were very dark and very intense. Catherine, I need to tell you something, and I hope it does not make things awkward between us, but I cannot keep it to myself any longer. Catherine's heart was hammering so hard she was sure he must be able to hear it. What is it? I have come to care for you, Vincent said, each word deliberate and weighted. More than a teacher cares for a student, more than a foreman cares for his crew. These past weeks working with you, getting to know you, watching you grow and learn and refuse to be beaten down, I have found myself thinking about you at all hours. Wondering if you are happy, hoping you are not too tired, looking forward to each morning because it means I will see you again. I know this is not proper. I know I am supposed to keep professional boundaries, but I needed you to know the truth. Catherine felt like all the air had been knocked from her lungs. Vincent, you do not have to say anything, he interrupted quickly. I know you have been through a lot, coming here and learning a whole new way of life. I am not asking for any promises or declarations. I just needed to be honest with you. But it will not change how I treat you, I promise. You will still have a place on this crew, still have someone to teach you and look out for you, regardless of how you feel about what I just said. Vincent, stop talking, Catherine said, and when he closed his mouth in surprise, she continued. I have been feeling the same way. I thought I was imagining it, or projecting, or being foolish. But every time you smile at me, every time you patiently explain something for the 10th time, every time you stand close enough that I can feel your warmth, I find myself wanting to close that distance between us. I find myself wondering what it would be like to be more than just your student, to be someone important to you." "You are important to me," Vincent said, his voice rough with emotion. "More important than I ever expected anyone to be again." They moved together as naturally as breathing, and when Vincent's lips met hers, Catherine felt like she had finally found something she had been searching for her entire life without knowing it. The kiss was gentle and sweet and full of promise, and when they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "So what happens now?" Catherine asked, suddenly shy. "Now we keep doing what we have been doing," Vincent said, reaching out to tuck a stray curl behind her ear. "I keep teaching you, you keep learning, but we do it knowing how we feel about each other. We take our time, let this grow naturally. There is no rush. I am not going anywhere, and neither are you." "I like the sound of that," Catherine said, and then, because she could, she kissed him again. Over the following weeks, Catherine and Vincent's relationship deepened alongside her growing skills as a ranch hand. They were careful to maintain professionalism during work hours, but in the evenings, they would steal time together, walking along the fence lines or sitting on the porch after dinner, talking about everything and nothing. Uncle Marcus noticed, of course. He was too sharp not to. One evening, he pulled Catherine aside after supper. "That foreman of mine seems to have taken quite a shine to you," Marcus said, his weathered face giving nothing away. Catherine felt her cheeks heat. "Yes, sir. I hope that is all right." Marcus studied her for a long moment. "Vincent Hartley is a good man. Honest, hardworking, fair with the crew. Knows more about horses and cattle than anyone I have ever met. If he is courting you properly and treating you with respect, I have got no objections. But you understand that you both still need to pull your weight around here. I will not have lovesick employees mooning around when there is work to be done." "No, sir," Catherine said quickly. "We would never let our personal feelings interfere with the work." "See that you do not," Marcus said, but there was a hint of a smile around his eyes. "Your father was a good man, Catherine. He would be proud of how hard you have been working to make a place for yourself here, and he would want you to be happy. If Vincent makes you happy, then you have got my blessing." Tears pricked Catherine's eyes at the mention of her father. "Thank you, Uncle Marcus. That means more to me than you know." As summer gave way to fall, Catherine became an integral part of the ranch operations. She could saddle and ride with confidence now, could muck stalls and groom horses and spot signs of illness or injury. Vincent had taught her about herding cattle, about checking fences and water sources, about the 100 small tasks that kept a ranch running smoothly. But more than that, she had found a community. The ranch hands who had once laughed at her now treated her as one of their own. Even Jake had eventually come around, offering her a grudging respect after she successfully helped calm a spooked horse that had thrown another rider. One crisp October morning, Vincent woke her before dawn with a gentle knock on her door. "Get dressed warm," he said when she opened it, still rubbing sleep from her eyes. "I want to show you something." 20 minutes later, they were riding out from the ranch as the first hints of light touched the eastern horizon. Vincent led them up into the foothills, following a trail that Catherine had never taken before. "Where are we going?" she asked, her breath fogging in the cold morning air. "You will see," Vincent said mysteriously. They rode for nearly an hour, climbing steadily higher, until they emerged onto a rocky outcropping that overlooked the entire valley. Below them, the ranch sprawled like a child's toy, the buildings small and neat in the growing light. Beyond it, the town of Durango was just visible in the distance, and beyond that, the mountains rose in serried ranks, their peaks already dusted with the first snows of the season. "Vincent, this is beautiful," Catherine breathed, taking in the view. "I thought you would like it," Vincent said, dismounting and helping her down. "I come up here sometimes when I need to think, when I need to remember why this place is worth all the hard work we put into it." They stood together at the edge of the outcrop, Vincent's arm around Catherine's shoulders, watching as the sun broke over the distant peaks and flooded the valley with golden light. "Catherine," Vincent said after a while, and there was something in his voice that made her look up at him. "These past months with you have been the happiest of my life. You have brought something into my days that I did not even know was missing. Light and laughter and possibility. You have shown me that starting over does not mean leaving behind the capacity for joy, for love, for hope." "Vincent," Catherine whispered, her heart beginning to race. He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "I know it has only been a few months. I know by all social conventions I should wait longer, but I have never been much for convention, and I know my own heart. Catherine Bradford, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Would you let me spend the rest of my life teaching you new things and learning from you in return? Would you build a life with me here in this beautiful, wild place?" Joy exploded through Catherine's chest like a firework, so intense it was almost painful. "Yes," she said, and then louder, "Yes, Vincent Hartley, I will marry you. Nothing would make me happier." Vincent whooped with delight and spun her around, both of them laughing like children. When he set her down, he kissed her thoroughly, and Catherine thought that no sunrise could possibly be as beautiful as this moment. They were married 6 weeks later, on a cold December day in 1874, in the small church in Durango. Uncle Marcus walked Catherine down the aisle, his eyes suspiciously bright, and the entire ranch crew turned out to witness the ceremony. Even Jake Morneau was there, and he shook Vincent's hand afterward with what looked like genuine goodwill. Catherine wore a simple dress of cream-colored wool, practical but lovely, and she carried a bouquet of dried wildflowers that one of the ranch wives had crafted for her. Vincent wore his best suit, and when he said his vows, his voice was strong and sure and full of love. They moved into the foreman's house, a snug 2-room cottage on the edge of the ranch property. It was not large or fancy, but Catherine made it into a home, hanging curtains she had sewn herself and arranging their few possessions with care. Vincent had carved her a set of shelves as a wedding present, and she filled them with books and small treasures. Their first winter together was cold but joyful. They would come in from the day's work with their cheeks flushed from wind and cold, and Catherine would make supper while Vincent tended the fire. In the evenings, they would sit together, Catherine reading aloud from whatever book she had borrowed from town while Vincent whittled or mended tack. "I never imagined I could be this content," Vincent said one evening, pulling Catherine close against his side. "Never imagined I could find someone who fits into my life so perfectly." "I never imagined I would find a life I fit into so perfectly," Catherine countered. "A year ago, I was a lost, scared girl who did not know the first thing about who she really was. Now I am a ranch wife who can ride and rope and work a full day without complaining. And I am married to the best man I have ever known. It feels like a dream sometimes." "If it is a dream, then I hope we never wake up," Vincent said, and kissed the top of her head. As winter gave way to spring, Catherine discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with a mixture of joy and terror. She had no memory of her own mother, no real idea of how to care for a baby, and she worried that she would prove as incompetent at motherhood as she had initially been at ranch work. But Vincent, characteristically, was patient and reassuring. "You will learn," he told her, placing his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Just like you learned everything else, and I will be right there beside you, learning too. We will figure it out together." Uncle Marcus was delighted at the prospect of a grand niece or nephew. "This ranch needs young blood," he said gruffly. "Needs the sound of children's laughter again. Your aunt and I were never blessed with children of our own, so you and Vincent will have to provide them." As Catherine's belly swelled with the growing baby, she found herself having to adjust how she did her work. She could no longer lift heavy saddles or wrestle hay bales, but Vincent and the other hands picked up the slack without complaint. She shifted her focus to tasks that required less physical strain, keeping records, organizing feed schedules, caring for newborn foals and calves. She discovered she had a gift for animal husbandry, a gentle touch and infinite patience that made even the most skittish creatures trust her. Vincent would often find her in the barn, sitting in the straw beside a nervous mare about to foal, speaking to the animal in low, soothing tones. "You are going to be an amazing mother," he told her one evening, watching her calm a fractious colt that had been separated from its dam for treatment. "I hope so," Catherine said. "I am terrified I will not know what to do." "None of us know what to do when we start," Vincent said. "We just love them and try our best and hope that is enough." Their son was born in late September of 1875, after a long and difficult labor that had Vincent pacing the house like a caged animal. When the midwife finally emerged to tell him he had a healthy boy, Vincent nearly collapsed with relief. Catherine was exhausted but glowing when he entered the bedroom. She held a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket, and when she pulled the fabric back to reveal a red-faced, squalling infant, Vincent felt his heart expand in his chest until he thought it might burst. "Meet your son," Catherine said softly. "I thought we might name him Samuel after your father, if that is all right with you." Vincent could not speak past the lump in his throat. He nodded, reaching out with one trembling finger to touch the baby's impossibly small hand. Samuel immediately grabbed his finger with a surprisingly strong grip, and Vincent was lost. "Hello, Samuel," he whispered. "I am your father, and I promise you that I will do everything in my power to be the kind of man my father was, to teach you everything he taught me, to love you the way he loved me." Catherine watched her husband with tears streaming down her face, and she knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice in marrying this man, in building this life with him. The next few years passed in a blur of hard work and quiet joy. Samuel grew from an infant into a curious toddler who followed Vincent around the ranch like a shadow, his chubby legs pumping to keep up with his father's long strides. Catherine found that Vincent had been right. She was a good mother, patient and loving and endlessly creative in keeping her active son engaged and learning. In 1877, Catherine gave birth to a daughter they named Grace, a placid baby with her mother's dark curls and her father's serious eyes. Samuel took his role as big brother very seriously, always wanting to help care for his sister, to make sure she was safe and happy. Catherine had never imagined she could be this happy. Her days were full of hard work, certainly, but it was satisfying work, work that had purpose and meaning. She was using skills she had fought hard to learn, contributing to the success of the ranch, raising children who would know both the value of hard work and the importance of kindness. And through it all, Vincent was her constant companion and partner. They worked together seamlessly now, anticipating each other's needs and movements after years of practice. He still taught her new things, still had endless patience for her questions and mistakes. But she taught him too, she realized. She taught him that it was okay to be vulnerable, to share his fears and doubts. She taught him that strength and gentleness were not opposites, but complements. One evening in the summer of 1878, when Samuel was nearly 3 and Grace was just past her first birthday, Catherine and Vincent sat on their porch watching the children play in the yard. Samuel was very seriously trying to teach Grace how to stack blocks, even though she was much more interested in knocking them down. "You ever regret it?" Vincent asked suddenly. "Leaving Boston, the life you could have had there?" Catherine looked at him in surprise. "Not for a single moment." "Why would you even ask that?" Vincent shrugged, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "I just wonder sometimes if you ever wish for more. More comfort, more ease, more of the refinements you grew up with." "Vincent Hartley, you look at me," Catherine commanded, and when he turned to face her, she took his face in her hands. "Everything I ever wanted, everything I ever needed is right here. You, our children, this life we have built together. I am exactly where I am supposed to be, doing exactly what I am supposed to be doing. I would not trade this for all the mansions and fancy dresses in Boston." "I love you," Vincent said, his voice rough with emotion. "I loved you from the moment you stood in that ranch yard, holding that saddle upside down, refusing to cry even though I could see how much you wanted to. I loved your courage, your determination, your stubborn refusal to give up, and I have fallen more in love with you every single day since then." "I love you too," Catherine said. "You saw something in me that I could not see in myself. You believed in me when no one else did, when I did not even believe in myself. You taught me everything I know, not just about ranch work but about strength and patience and what it means to be truly partnered with someone. You made me who I am today." They kissed as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in those brilliant colors that Catherine had come to love so much. Samuel made a disgusted noise from the yard, and Grace clapped her chubby hands, and Catherine thought that this moment was perfection, was everything she had never known to dream of. Uncle Marcus died peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1879, and Catherine grieved the loss of the man who had taken her in when she had nowhere else to go. To everyone's surprise, Marcus had left the Double H Ranch to Catherine and Vincent jointly in his will, with a provision that any profits should be shared equally with the ranch hands who worked the land. "He must have known," Catherine said as they read the will together. "Must have planned this all along." "He was a shrewd man," Vincent agreed. "He saw potential in both of us, gave us the chance to prove ourselves. Now he is trusting us to carry on his legacy, and they did." Under Vincent's management and Catherine's organizational skills, the Double H Ranch prospered. They treated their hands fairly, paid them well, and in return received loyalty and hard work. The ranch became known throughout Colorado for the quality of its horses, and buyers came from as far away as Denver and Santa Fe to purchase their stock. Catherine had not forgotten what it felt like to be humiliated, to be mocked for not knowing things that seemed obvious to everyone else. So when they hired new hands, especially young people or those from cities who had never worked a ranch before, Catherine made it her mission to ensure they received the same patience and understanding that Vincent had shown her. "Everyone starts somewhere," she would tell Vincent when he found her spending extra time with a struggling new hire. "Everyone deserves a teacher who believes in them." In 1881, their third child was born, another boy they named Marcus in honor of Catherine's uncle. By this time, Samuel was old enough to understand what was happening, and he was fascinated by the whole process of having a new sibling. Grace, now a precocious 4-year-old, announced that she was going to teach Marcus everything he needed to know about being a proper member of the family. Vincent had expanded their little cottage over the years, adding rooms as their family grew. It was still not a grand house by any means, but it was filled with love and laughter and the comfortable chaos of children. Catherine sometimes thought about the girl she had been when she first arrived in Durango, lost and scared and utterly unprepared for the life that awaited her. That girl seemed like a stranger now, someone from another lifetime. The woman she had become was strong and capable, confident in her skills and secure in her place in the world. But she never forgot where she had started, never forgot the kindness that had transformed her life. And she made sure to extend that same kindness to others whenever she could. One spring day in 1883, a young woman arrived at the ranch, sent by a relative much as Catherine had been years before. Her name was Elizabeth, and she stood in the ranch yard looking utterly overwhelmed, her city clothes already dusty from the journey, her eyes wide with apprehension. Catherine saw herself in that girl, saw the same fear and uncertainty she had felt. She walked over with a welcoming smile. "You must be Elizabeth," Catherine said warmly. "I am Catherine Hartley. Welcome to the Double H Ranch." "Thank you, madam," Elizabeth said, her voice shaking slightly. "I apologize in advance. I do not know anything about ranch work. I have never even touched a horse before." "That is perfectly all right," Catherine assured her. "Neither had I when I first came here. But I had someone who taught me everything with endless patience, and now I am going to do the same for you. You are going to make mistakes, and that is expected. You are going to feel overwhelmed, and that is normal. But I promise you, if you are willing to work hard and keep trying, you are going to discover strengths you never knew you had." Elizabeth looked at her with such hope in her eyes that Catherine felt her throat tighten with emotion. "My husband Vincent is the foreman here," Catherine continued. "He is the best teacher I have ever known, patient and kind and never judgmental. Between the two of us, we will make sure you learn everything you need to know. You are not alone in this, Elizabeth. You have a whole community here ready to support you." As Catherine led Elizabeth toward the barn to begin her first lesson, she glanced back toward the house where Vincent was visible through the window, working on the ranch accounts with Samuel and Grace, helping by making a mess of his papers. Marcus was likely napping in his cradle nearby. Her family, her home, her life. She had come to this place broken and afraid, and it had remade her into someone she was proud to be. She had been humiliated for not knowing things that everyone else seemed to know instinctively. But that humiliation had been the beginning of a journey that had brought her everything she held dear. Vincent had taught her about ranch work with endless patience, yes, but he had taught her so much more than that. He had taught her that it was okay to not know things, that asking for help was a sign of strength rather than weakness. He had taught her that mistakes were opportunities for learning rather than reasons for shame. He had taught her that the most important qualities a person could have were not skills or knowledge, but rather determination, kindness, and the courage to keep trying even when things were hard. And in the process of teaching her all of that, he had also taught her what real love looked like. Not the shallow infatuation she had witnessed in Boston ballrooms, but the deep, abiding partnership of two people who chose each other every single day, who supported each other through challenges, who celebrated each other's victories and mourned each other's losses. That evening, after Elizabeth had been settled into the bunkhouse with the other female ranch hands and the children had been fed and put to bed, Catherine found Vincent on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Long day?" she asked, settling into the chair beside him. "Good day," he corrected, reaching out to take her hand. "I saw you with the new girl, Elizabeth. You were wonderful with her, so patient and encouraging." "I learned from the best," Catherine said, squeezing his hand. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, the distant lowing of cattle, the soft whicker of horses in the barn, the chirp of crickets in the grass. "You remember that first day?" Catherine asked. "When I was standing in the yard holding that saddle upside down, and everyone was laughing." "I remember," Vincent said quietly. "I remember thinking what a crime it was, good people mocking someone for not knowing things they had never been taught." I remember wanting to protect you, to show you that not everyone would treat you that way. You saved me, Catherine said, not just from embarrassment but from giving up. If you had been like the others, if you had dismissed me or treated me as a joke, I probably would have run back to Boston on the next stage. I would have spent the rest of my life feeling like a failure, like someone who was not strong enough to make it on her own. You would have found your strength eventually, Vincent said. It was always there inside you, just waiting to be discovered. Maybe, Catherine conceded, but you were the one who helped me find it. You were patient when I needed patience, firm when I needed pushing, encouraging when I needed hope. You saw potential in me that I could not see in myself, and you helped me become the person I was meant to be. You did the same for me, Vincent said, turning to look at her in the starlight. Before you came, I was just going through the motions of life. Working hard, doing my job, but not really living. Not really connecting with anyone or anything on a deep level. You reminded me that life was meant to be shared, that work was more fulfilling when you had someone to work alongside, that success meant nothing if you had no one to celebrate it with. We saved each other then, Catherine said softly. We saved each other, Vincent agreed. And we keep saving each other, every single day. That is what love is, I think. Not some grand romantic gesture, but the quiet, steady choice to be there for each other, to support each other, to help each other be the best versions of ourselves. Catherine stood and moved to sit in Vincent's lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. He held her close, his face buried in her hair, and they stayed that way for a long time. Two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed, exactly when they needed it. The years continued to pass, bringing their share of challenges and triumphs. There were droughts that tested their resources, harsh winters that pushed them to their limits, market fluctuations that threatened their financial stability. But through it all, Catherine and Vincent faced everything as a team, their partnership growing stronger with each obstacle they overcame together. Their children grew up learning the same lessons Catherine had learned, understanding that hard work and determination could overcome any obstacle, that kindness and patience were more valuable than innate talent, that asking for help was a sign of wisdom rather than weakness. Samuel grew into a serious, thoughtful young man who had inherited his father's way with horses. Grace was spirited and bold, never afraid to try new things even if she might fail. Marcus was the peacemaker of the family, always trying to smooth over conflicts and find compromise. In 1889, Catherine and Vincent celebrated their 15th wedding anniversary. Their children organized a surprise party, inviting everyone from the ranch and half the town of Durango besides. The barn was decorated with lanterns and wildflowers, and someone had brought a fiddle player from town to provide music. As Catherine and Vincent danced together, surrounded by the community they had built and the family they had raised, Catherine felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. She thought about the scared girl who had arrived in Durango 15 years earlier, about all the tears and struggles and moments of doubt. And she thought about how every single one of those difficult moments had been worth it, had been necessary steps on the path to this life she loved so deeply. "What are you thinking about?" Vincent asked, pulling back slightly to look at her face. "Just how far we have come," Catherine said. "How much we have built together. How grateful I am for that first day when you chose to be kind instead of cruel, patient instead of dismissive." "Best decision I ever made," Vincent said. "Well, second best. The best was asking you to marry me." "Third best," Catherine corrected with a smile. "Second best was saying yes when I accepted." They laughed together, and then Vincent spun her out and pulled her back in, and the music swelled around them, and Catherine felt like she was flying. As they raised their children and ran their ranch and grew older together, Catherine never lost sight of what mattered most. She continued to mentor new ranch hands, to offer patience and understanding to those who were struggling to learn. She became known throughout the region as someone who could train even the most difficult horses, not through force or domination, but through patience and connection. Vincent, for his part, never stopped being amazed by his wife. She continued to surprise him with her strength, her wisdom, her seemingly endless capacity for growth and learning. Even after years of marriage, he still found himself falling in love with her all over again in unexpected moments, watching her gentle a skittish colt or laugh with their children, or organize the ranch accounts with meticulous care. In 1895, Samuel married a local girl named Abigail, and Catherine found herself becoming a grandmother when their first child was born the following year. Watching Vincent hold his grandchild, seeing the same wonder and love in his eyes that had been there when he first held Samuel, Catherine felt her heart overflow with joy. Grace, true to her adventurous nature, decided to become a teacher, opening a small school in Durango where she taught not just reading and writing but practical skills like horse care and basic ranching. "Everyone should have the chance to learn," she would say, echoing the philosophy her parents had raised her with. "Everyone deserves a patient teacher who believes in them." Marcus took over more and more of the ranch operations as Vincent and Catherine grew older, showing the same steady competence and patience his father had always demonstrated. He married in 1898, and his wife Clara proved to be just as capable and hardworking as any of the Hartley women. As the new century dawned, Catherine and Vincent found themselves in their 50s, their children grown and starting families of their own, their grandchildren filling the ranch house with noise and laughter. They had slowed down somewhat, no longer able to work the long days they once had, but they were still active and engaged in the life of the ranch. One evening, as they sat together on their porch watching yet another spectacular sunset, Catherine reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. "You remember what you told me that very first day?" she asked Vincent, "when I was so upset about being humiliated." "I told you a lot of things that day," Vincent said with a smile. "Which part are you thinking of?" "You said that no one is born knowing how to saddle a horse, that everyone has to learn at some point," Catherine said. "And you said that I was not useless, just untrained. That there was a difference." "I remember," Vincent said. "And I was right, was I not?" "You were right," Catherine agreed. "About so many things, but especially about that. Because the truth is, we are all always learning, always growing, always discovering new things we did not know before. The trick is having people in our lives who are patient enough to teach us, kind enough to see our potential even when we cannot see it ourselves." "You taught me just as much as I taught you," Vincent said. "Maybe more. You taught me how to open my heart again after I thought I had lost that ability when my father died. You taught me that building a life with someone is not about finding someone who is already perfect, but about growing together, learning together, becoming better versions of ourselves together." "We make a good team," Catherine said softly. "The best team," Vincent confirmed, pulling her close against his side. They sat in peaceful silence as the sun dipped below the mountains and the stars began to emerge. Around them, the ranch was settling in for the night, the work of the day done, everything in its proper place. Inside the house, they could hear their grandchildren's voices raised in laughter and the deeper tones of their children responding. This was the life they had built together, Catherine thought with deep satisfaction. Starting from that moment of humiliation and despair, through patience and love and endless determination, they had created something beautiful and lasting. They had raised children who understood the value of hard work and kindness. They had built a ranch that treated its workers with fairness and respect. They had formed a partnership that had weathered every storm and emerged stronger on the other side. "Thank you," Catherine said suddenly, turning to look at Vincent in the gathering darkness. "For what?" he asked, though his eyes were soft with understanding. "For everything," Catherine said. "For teaching me, for believing in me, for loving me. For being patient when I needed patience, for pushing me when I needed pushing, for standing beside me through everything. For building this life with me, for being exactly who you are." "Thank you for letting me," Vincent said, cupping her face in his weathered hands. "Thank you for taking a chance on a gruff foreman who did not know how to express his feelings. Thank you for seeing past my rough exterior to the man underneath. Thank you for choosing me, every single day, even when things were hard." They kissed as they had 1,000 times before, but it still felt as sweet and meaningful as that very first kiss on the outcropping overlooking the valley. Some things, Catherine thought, never grew old. Some things only deepened and matured, like fine wine or well-aged wood. "I love you, Vincent Hartley," she whispered against his lips. "I love you, Catherine Hartley," he whispered back. "Today, tomorrow, and for all the days after that." As the stars wheeled overhead and the night deepened around them, Catherine and Vincent Hartley sat together on their porch, surrounded by the life they had built, the family they had raised, and the love that had sustained them through everything. From humiliation to triumph, from despair to joy, from strangers to soulmates, they had traveled the journey together. And they would continue traveling it together, hand in hand, heart to heart, for all the years that remained to them. The ranch would continue, passed down through generations who would carry on the values they had established. The lessons of patience and kindness would echo through the years. And the love story that had begun with a cowboy teaching a city girl how to saddle a horse would become a legend told around dinner tables and campfires. A reminder that the best things in life often grow from the humblest beginnings, nurtured by patience, watered by tears, and blooming into something more beautiful than anyone could have imagined. Catherine looked out at the land she had come to love so deeply, the mountains standing silent and eternal against the star-studded sky, and she felt complete. She had found her place in the world, had become the person she was meant to be, had loved and been loved in return. What more could anyone ask for? Vincent's hand found hers in the darkness, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice, and Catherine smiled. Nothing more, she thought. This was everything. This was enough. This was perfect. And so they sat together as the night deepened around them. Two souls who had found each other across the divide of different worlds, who had built a bridge of patience and love and endless determination, who had created a life together that was richer and fuller than either could have imagined in their solitary pasts. The humiliation that had once burned so hot had long since transformed into gratitude, the tears of shame into tears of joy, the awkward student into a confident teacher in her own right. The Wild West had tested them both, had demanded everything they had to give and more. But they had met those demands together, and in doing so had discovered that the greatest adventure was not taming the land, but opening their hearts to each other. The greatest skill was not in breaking horses, but in building trust. The greatest strength was not in physical prowess, but in the patience to teach and the humility to learn. And as the moon rose over the Colorado peaks, casting silver light across the valley where the Double H Ranch lay peaceful and prosperous, Catherine and Vincent Hartley held each other close and counted their blessings, knowing that they had found something rare and precious. A love built on respect, sustained by partnership, and deepened by time. A love that had begun with a simple act of kindness and had grown into something that would last forever.